Today's episode of Behind the Numbers is brought to you by Hafley Flanagan. Hafley Flanagan is a full-service accounting firm that's been serving our clients since 1967. We are not your typical accounting firm. Our services extend well beyond tax and audit to include valuation services, strategic and succession planning, leadership development, and more. When you work with Hafley Flanagan, we help you realize your long-term goals. Learn more at hfco.com or call 856-722-5300. Today.
Hi everyone, and welcome to Behind the Numbers. My name is Dave Bookbinder, and welcome to the show where we dig deeper to understand what really matters most in business. Today I am pleased to welcome as my guest Lou Rodriguez, who is the CEO at Rodriguez Consulting. Lou, welcome to Behind the Numbers.
Thanks, Dave. It's great to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you. Why don't you introduce yourself to the audience? Tell the audience a little bit about you and a little bit about Rodriguez Consulting.
So my name is Lou Rodriguez. I am a licensed civil engineer in Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Delaware, and I founded an engineering company back in 2007 called Rodriguez Consulting. So we're a civil engineering land surveying firm based in Philadelphia. And I also founded a workforce development initiative a few years ago called Rodriguez University.
That's great. We're going to talk about all of this. We're going to get to Rodriguez University a little bit later in the program. But before we get too deep into the conversation here, for those of us who don't really know what a civil engineer does or what a land surveyor does, Lou, why don't you tell us a little bit about those roles?
So civil engineers, we focus a lot on what you would call the built environment. So all those things that for the most part, we may take for granted: roads, sidewalks, water mains, sewers, stormwater systems, ADA ramps, parking lots, so traffic signals, stop signs. So all those things that we rely on as citizens in our day-to-day life. I always tell people when everything's working, people typically don't think about civil engineers. It's usually when something goes wrong is then all of a sudden infrastructure and civil engineers get kind of pushed to the forefront. But that's the layman's term of what we do.
Gotcha. And when you and I met and we were talking about an idea for the kinds of things we wanted to talk about when we were on the air together, you were very keen on not really wanting to talk a lot about the business, but more about the leadership and your team and your people. So would love to explore that with you now. And let's start with the importance of the team. So many times I talk to business owners and entrepreneurs, and they feel like they need to just be the one. They're in charge. They feel like they need to do it alone, and it's difficult for them to let go. But you've mentioned to me that the team is the most important thing for you. Why don't you speak to that?
Well, absolutely. I mean, because people ask me all the time what I do, and I said, when I graduated from college, I went to work for the city of Philadelphia, and I was a civil engineer. I did calculations and all those things and created plans. But as you move into becoming a business owner, I tell people nowadays I typically focus more on making payroll than anything else, and I rely heavily on a team. I mean, the reason I can even be on this podcast is I have people working all day long, putting together plans, doing designs, and doing a lot of essential functions that we rely on day to day. But it's their jobs and what they do that kind of allow me to do these things. And then my job is to kind of continue to grow that, to develop pathways for people to kind of get into this industry and do things. But we have a great team. I mean, we have a number of licensed professionals, both engineers and surveyors on the team. So typically I'm not even the one anymore that even signs the drawings. I'm really the one that kind of provides the vision for the company, but I'm not in the day-to-day, crunching numbers and putting plans together. They are.
Yeah, and so many teams and businesses were impacted by COVID, and I wanted to understand what your team experienced. Coming out of COVID, Lou, have things changed for you and the way you and your colleagues interact?
Yeah, it certainly changed. I mean, I think as a small business, you have to learn to be nimble and adapt. And I think, when I first really had to to deal with some things when you talk about just simply working remote. I think of the year 2010, we had two 24-inch blizzards about 2 weeks apart, and my team literally was separated because you couldn't even get to the office. But we had already been utilizing the Google Workspace backbone back then, and so that kind of was the impetus of like, we were always set up for if there was bad weather, there was an issue, everybody could just grab their laptops, be remote, and get things done. And typically back then, we would do it for a week, 2 weeks, wait for the snow to melt or the weather to calm down, and we're back. But when COVID happened, I think initially, like everyone else, we thought it's going to be just like a snowstorm. It'll be 2 weeks. We took our stuff, went home, and then we realized about 2 weeks in that this is going to go on for a while. The beauty, I think, for what we do is, I'd say about 60% of my team, works on the technical side. So they were able to do just fine working remotely as long as they had an internet connection. The other 40% does work out in the field, boots on the ground. Probably the only real big adjustment we had to make with COVID is we typically would go out in 2-person crews, 2 people in a vehicle. We shifted and actually moved to 1-person crews, and it just presented a little bit of challenges working that way. But for the most part, to be totally honest, it didn't affect our business a whole lot. And if anything, from a business owner standpoint, things actually got a little bit better for us because we started to get a little bit smoother operations, and kind of cut through a lot of stuff and just get things done. Today, on this day in 2024, much like other businesses, we're kind of morphing into what the new thing is. It's a hybrid model. I want to stay this way hybrid because I feel like that there was plenty of things that we learned that worked well working from home. Some didn't, but I have a number of people with children, both male and female, that working from home is huge to be able to do that. And if they had to just be forced to come back and work 5 days a week, I'd probably lose some staff, just because it's just not best for them.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I see that a lot. I think there's true benefit in the hybrid model, and obviously if someone's working in a situation where they literally can't work from home, obviously they've got to be in the office. But for the knowledge workers, they're pretty much demanding that there's some flexibility there, and I think the companies that are allowing that are certainly benefiting from that. So Lou, shifting gears just a little bit here, you're the leader. You set the tone for everything inside an organization as the guy whose name is on the side of the trucks and the shirts and everything else. What does leadership mean to you?
Leadership, probably at its core is you have to be willing to do the things that you're asking your team to do. I think early on in my career, I remember when I worked for the city of Philadelphia, we had designing sewers, and believe it or not, there were people that still had to go down into sewers and inspect them for what we did. And I remember early on, I went out with the sewer operators and I said, you know what, give me a suit, I'm going down. And I think they thought I was kidding, and I said, no, I'm serious. And I took the approach, was like, if I'm going to ask you to do it, I'll do it. And it kind of became the mantra for most of the things I would do in my career is that, I've worn boots, I've gone outside, I've done these things. And also on the other side, on a family perspective, is to understand, especially when you own a business, that individuals that work for me, their problems become my problems, and to be able to listen, understand situations. Again, like we're talking about COVID, not everybody had the same, same situation, and so to kind of be a listener and somebody that's again, not afraid to do the things that you're asking other people to do.
Yeah, exactly. And when we think about leadership, Lou, I can't help but go to kind of the culture of the organization. How do you define the culture at Rodriguez Consulting, and what are you doing to develop it intentionally?
I think the ethos behind what we do, we're, again, civil engineers, and we're a private business, we're a for-profit business, but our biggest client is the city of Philadelphia, and I see it, and we see it as the collaboration. When I worked for the city years ago, I'd say 80-90% of the staff and all the work was done in-house, and there wasn't many consultants. And 30 years later, it's completely the opposite. It's probably more than 10% of the work happens in-house, and they rely heavily on consultants. And we see ourselves as an extension of the city, And having been a former city worker, I can see some benefits of how a private company, nimble, not really held back by the restrictions of civil service, how we can kind of work together. We, in addition to also doing design work and things for the city, we even have some staff augmentation contracts with the city, and so we become really their arm, and that collaboration is kind of key. And kind of the other one is for what we do, infrastructure, and I know it's a buzzword sometimes, but sustainable infrastructure, making sure that what we do is going to last for 100, 150 years, because that's what the city expects. And then also to make sure that we have a staff that looks like the communities where the infrastructure is, which I think is probably the one thing I've tried really hard to do. It's not always the easiest thing, but to make sure that, that we have again, a word you hear a lot, a diverse team that has different backgrounds, and that there can be a ton of positives with that, having different perspectives and backgrounds.
Yeah, and I want to maybe explore that when we come back from break, Lou. But before we do go to a commercial, why don't you tell the audience how they can connect with you or learn more about you?
Pretty simply, the Rodriguez Company, you can go to www.rodriguez.biz. And if you want to learn more about the Rodriguez University initiative, it's rodriguezu.com. And Alex Rodriguez, kind of think of how you would spell Alex Rodriguez. It's with a G and a Z. So.
There you go. And we're going to talk about Rodriguez University when we come back. But Lou, sit tight. Folks out there in the audience, don't go anywhere. We will be right back after this quick break.
Un ataque cerebral puede ser fácil de detectar. Su ser querido no logra hablar o quizás no puede moverse, pero existe otro síntoma de ataque cerebral que muchos de nosotros no vemos. Se llama negligencia espacial y puede ocurrir durante o después de un ataque cerebral, causando movimientos visuales distorsionados. Afortunadamente, existe una solución que utiliza tecnología óptica basada en prismas durante la rehabilitación. Si usted o su ser querido experimenta un ataque cerebral, pregúntele a su doctor sobre la negligencia espacial. Encuentre más información en kesslerfoundation.org.
Wait, I have you surrounded. You just gonna stand there, or are you gonna take your lawn back?
We're gonna take it back.
We're gonna take it back.
With Scott's Turf Builder Triple Action, it gets 3 jobs done at once. Kills weeds, prevents crabgrass, and keeps your lawn growing strong. Glorious!
No.
Get a bag of Scott's Triple Action today. It's guaranteed.
Feed your lawn.
Today's episode of Behind the Numbers is brought to you by Hafley Flanagan. Hafley Flanagan is a full-service accounting firm that's been serving our clients since 1967. We are not your typical accounting firm. Our services extend well beyond tax and audit to include valuation services, strategic and succession planning, leadership development, and more. When you work with Hafley Flanagan, we help you realize your long-term goals. Learn more at hfco.com or call 856-722-5300.
And welcome back to Behind the Numbers. I'm Dave Bookbinder, and we are talking with Lou Rodriguez, who is the Chief Executive Officer at Rodriguez Consulting. Lou, welcome back from the break here. I wanted to pick up on what we left off with. I wrote down when you were speaking about you aspire to have your staff, quote, look like the community in which they serve, in which they operate. I want you to expound on that a little bit and why that's important.
When I think back to the beginning of my career when I worked for the Philadelphia Water Department, the floor I was on was made up of degreed professionals like myself, engineers and architects, and I'd say it's about 60% of the floor. But the other 40% of the floor was made up of technicians, aides, and even administrative staff, most of which did not have a degree, but were vital in what we do. And I noticed as my career progressed, especially during the dot-com era, that a lot of the shift in that particular demographic, the non-degreed positions, was moving more towards technology. And a lot of those seats I saw at the city all of a sudden became empty. And fast forward when I started my own business, it was a business challenge that I wasn't the one going to draw the plans. I wasn't the one going to go out in the field and collect the data. And it became a real challenge to find qualified people and then it was really for me to kind of, hey, maybe we can create people, and then even go another step further, but create people from the communities where this infrastructure is being built. And it's become kind of a 10-year mission for me to try to solve that Rubik's Cube that we're now pretty heavily vested into.
Gotcha. You had mentioned Rodriguez University more than once. I told you we were going to get an opportunity to talk about it, so let's do that now. Tell the audience what that is.
So what it is about years ago, I connected with a nonprofit in Camden called Hopeworks that was really doing an excellent job of training people in Camden, New Jersey, some technical skills in connected to the industry I was in, and admired what they were doing, and always had an interest. And fast, I lost touch with them for a little while, but then around 2018, I reconnected with the organization. We sat down, the nonprofit and the for-profit, and we had a discussion about, hey, how we could do what they're doing, but focus it, target it in the infrastructure industry. And so we kind of put together a plan and a proposal, and it started. And ironically, this whole thing launched in 2020. So, right after the pandemic hit, we got this we got this grant. And it became my really big initiative that I would do while the rest of the world was locked at home. Is that how would we train 6 individuals in an office in South Kensington to do infrastructure work? And it worked. Because there was nobody in the office, we were able to spread people out, 10 feet apart, and train them, and we got them jobs. We started with a small group, and we did it. Some of them worked in Rodriguez, some of them went to go work for the city, and so this pilot worked. And since then, we've now done this program 3 times, and most recently, where it's really kind of culminated, is this year, just about a month ago, the mayor of Philadelphia, Sherelle Parker, announced that some federal infrastructure money was going to be focused specifically to workforce development. And Rodriguez and Hopeworks, it's actually Rodriguez University is an initiative we created, but we joined together and received a grant from the city of Philadelphia, to actually do this officially for the city, and with the water department and the streets department being our partners.
And again, where can folks learn more about Rodriguez University, Lou?
So RodriguezU.com, so www.rodriguezu.com. And again, we'll be starting, we have a cohort right now that's funded by the William Penn Foundation, but we'll be starting another cohort this summer, right after the 4th of July, and that cohort will be funded by the City of Philadelphia's Workforce Development Program.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for sharing.
And I should add, too, to kind of connect to what we see in the news, is this is all kind of directly connected to the infrastructure bipartisan initiative that you see coming from the federal government. So it kind of ties what you might see in the news and how money is being spent on infrastructure, but that if cities and towns and counties are getting these funds, that it's important that part of the government's requirements is workforce is a big part of this.
Great. Thank you for sharing that. So Lou, today's episode of Behind the Numbers is being sponsored by Hafley Flanagan, and I believe you're a client of theirs, right?
Yes, Hafley Flanagan has been our accounting firm for over 10 years. Both Jim Hafley and Erica Peterson of any small business, the accountants that you choose are going to be really important. And Hafley Flanagan has essentially been an extension of my company. I'm an engineer, so I didn't have a whole lot of business training or formal education. And so it's not just doing taxes. There's a lot of things that occur that I rely heavily on them. And also that Hafley Flanagan does a lot of work in the engineering infrastructure sector. So it's been helpful to have an accounting firm that knows about the business and construction and engineering and even government requirements, that may be foreign to people, but it's a big deal for what we do, especially when we work for the government and what we're allowed to charge for and what we're not. So it's been a great partnership that we've had, and it's continuing year and year. It changes based on the situation, but they're an extension of what we do.
Well, thanks for sharing. I know they will very much appreciate those kind words. Want to shift to your journey of entrepreneurship, Lou, and how you got started in the business and the unique name of your company, if you will.
Yeah, Rodriguez, my father, was the same name as mine, Lou Rodriguez, was born in Puerto Rico. So, he's the first of our family that, came over from to the continental U.S. And I grew up in the 70s and 80s. my father's Puerto Rican, my mother's Polish. Those weren't two nationalities that you were running around, announcing to the world at those times. So I generally just kind of kept quiet about it. If you didn't ask, I wasn't going to, discuss much about it. But as I progressed in my career and as times changed, and even working for the government, I started to understand that there were programs out there to help those that are minority-owned, women-owned, even disadvantaged businesses. And I processed it for a while. And when I went out on my own, I decided to get the company certified. So we are a certified minority business enterprise with the city of Philadelphia, with Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Delaware, and even with the federal government. Early on, it was a big part of how I got work into the firm, knowing that there was percentages, much like we're talking about on the workforce side, but there's percentages on the contract side when you're talking about local and government contracts. And where it's shifted now from a business owner is I don't think that's not the way I want to lead things. I don't think where my father was born is really going to have any indication of how good we are at what we do. So we've made the shift where, let's say, more than 70% of our work now is our own direct contracts without necessarily. But it's also an important part of what I do. I mean, I was the chairman of the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce in Philadelphia for 5 years, and I'm still very active with the chamber and really just trying to help even that pathways, to entrepreneurship. Because I tell people, my grandfather came here in 1955 and he was picking peppers in Vineland, New Jersey. It took 40 years to kind of go from, a migrant worker to my father being an accountant to his son, being an entrepreneur and a business owner. And it's definitely not something that it's easy to do, but I think even myself is it takes time. It's not something that's going to happen overnight.
Yeah, and thanks for sharing that, Lou. So when we talked about your staff and the challenges around having good people on board, and sometimes the challenges of finding people in general, what are some of the important characteristics that you look for when you're hiring?
It's a great question, and I sometimes refer to it in a positive way as the team that we have is kind of like, you think of the Island of the Misfit Toys from Rudolph, was the cartoon growing up, or even a movie like The Breakfast Club. I think, we're a different group of people, because there are plenty of options in this day and age if you're a civil engineer or a land surveyor with LinkedIn to get jobs. It's not a profession that's hard to get jobs. So typically we've had to find people that have the qualifications that might be a little different. And probably a good example is we have a number of foreign-born individuals that work for Rodriguez. People from Albania, people from Poland, people from Cameroon, people from Uzbekistan. And it became a competitive thing that I started to notice that Philadelphia was drawing in a lot of immigrants to this area. They couldn't afford to live in New York or Washington, D.C., but it changed my perception. They had phenomenal education, phenomenal training. Their only real issue was the fact that their English wasn't their first language. So that's one example. It's not the only one, but that's one example of where we've had to kind of be different, because in a profession, and I hate to say, but civil engineering and land surveying, if you go to a conference and you look around, you're going to see a lot of people that look like me. Actually, a lot of people are even older than me. And I think, as a business owner, I had to realize that, well, most of those people are going to flock to the large firms that are out there for them. How can we be different? And then also, we're based in Philadelphia. We're in South Kensington, we specifically look for individuals that, want to make a difference in an urban environment. It's different than being in, Dewey Beach, Delaware, or Sussex County or Lancaster County. But it's very rewarding if you can find individuals that want to make a difference in an urban environment, and knowing all the challenges you see, in TV when they talk about it, and saying, hey, but you have an opportunity to make a difference, to make change. That we're rebuilding communities essentially one block at a time in a place like Philadelphia, and it is very rewarding. And to have people that say, hey, to be able to drive down the street 5 years from now and be able to point at a block and say, that's mine, I did that. You're looking for individuals that see the world that way.
Yeah, Lou, we're unfortunately getting close to the end here, but I want to give you an opportunity to share with the audience any lessons, advice, tips that you may have for aspiring entrepreneurs or CEOs that are in the throes of it day to day. What are the lessons you've learned? What would you share with them?
Probably the last thing is to make sure that you give back. I mean, I think it's As part of what I've tried to do with Rodriguez University is that, I've been blessed with, being successful, you can always make more money, but I have what I need. And I think that our profession, as many others, is critical for individuals to do what they can to give back. And sometimes that's difficult for people, believe it or not. I think that, you don't have to expect immediate results, that to do some things to kind of give back to the community, and whether that be the locations where you do things or the individuals, I think that's been kind of a key thing. And to kind of instill that even in the staff that I work for. We have a community committee in the company, and I now rely on them to say, hey, it's not what Lou wants to do. What do you want to do? How can you steer this ship towards some things where we can make a difference and kind of put it all together and allow them to kind of have a chance to have a voice. And I think that's a huge part of what we do.
Yeah, and that's great. That's a theme I hear a lot. The ones who give back certainly reap more of what they put back into the market and back into the universe, if you will. Lou, thank you so much for joining us today on Behind the Numbers. It was great having you here.
Thanks a lot, Dave. I appreciate it.
Pleasure. We've been talking with Lou Rodriguez, who's the CEO at Rodriguez Consulting. And my name is Dave Bookbinder, and I'm the one that I help my clients in valuing their businesses and intellectual property assets. If you're a business owner and you don't know the value of your business, definitely reach out to me. You can find me on LinkedIn. Hafele Flanagan was kind enough to sponsor today's episode of Behind the Numbers. I want to thank them for that, and I would recommend that you out there definitely check Hafele Flanagan out. You can find them at hfco.com. As Lou said, they're more than just your typical accounting firm. Thanks to the Big Cheese for running the board today, and thank you for watching and listening. Can't do it without you. We'll see you next time on Behind the Numbers. Take care.
Today's episode of Behind the Numbers is brought to you by Hafele Flanagan. Hafele Flanagan is a full-service accounting firm that's been serving our clients since 1967. We are not your typical accounting firm. Our services extend well beyond tax and audit to include valuation services, strategic and succession planning, leadership development, and more. When you work with Hafele Flanagan, we help you realize your long-term goals. Learn more at hfco.com or call 856-722-5300. Today's episode of Behind the Numbers is brought to you by Hafele Flanagan. Hafele Flanagan is a full-service accounting firm that's been serving our clients since 1967. We are not your typical accounting firm. Our services extend well beyond tax and audit to include valuation services, strategic and succession planning, leadership development, and more. When you work with Hafele Flanagan, we help you realize your long-term goals. Learn more at hfco.com or call 856-722-5300. Today's episode of Behind the Numbers is brought to you by Hafele Flanagan. Hafele Flanagan is a full-service accounting firm that's been serving our clients since 1967. We are not your typical accounting firm. Our services extend well beyond tax and audit to include valuation services, strategic and succession planning, leadership development, and more. When you work with Hafele Flanagan, we help you realize your long-term goals. Learn more at hfco.com or call 856-722-5300. Today's episode of Behind the Numbers is brought to you by Hafele Flanagan. Hafele Flanagan is a full-service accounting firm that's been serving our clients since 1967. We are not your typical accounting firm. Our services extend well beyond tax and audit to include valuation services, strategic and succession planning, leadership development, and more. When you work with Hafele Flanagan, we help you realize your long-term goals. Learn more at hfco.com or call 856-722-5300. Today's episode of Behind the Numbers is brought to you by Hafele Flanagan. Hafele Flanagan is a full-service accounting firm that's been serving our clients since 1967. We are not your typical accounting firm. Our services extend well beyond tax and audit to include valuation services, strategic and succession planning, leadership development, and more. When you work with Hafele Flanagan, we help you realize your long-term goals. Learn more at hfco.com or call 856-722-5300. Today's episode of Behind the Numbers is brought to you by Hafele Flanagan. Hafele Flanagan is a full-service accounting firm that's been serving our clients since 1967. We are not your typical accounting firm. Our services extend well beyond tax and audit to include valuation services, strategic and succession planning, leadership development, and more. When you work with Hafley Flanagan, we help you realize your long-term goals. Learn more at hfco.com or call 856-722-5300. Today's episode of Behind the Numbers is brought to you by Hafley Flanagan. Hafley Flanagan is a full-service accounting firm that's been serving our clients since 1967. We are not your typical accounting firm. Our services extend well beyond tax and audit to include valuation services, strategic and succession